if we have grasped this concept, the separation between what I refer to as the world of Malchut, which is the illusionary world, the world that seems to be distorted, and then there is the world of reality. While we have all been educated and brought up with a philosophy that what you can touch, the five senses, as you know, that's the world of the physical world of reality is reality. But along came the scientists of late and have told us physical reality is an illusion. And if the scientist of today makes that kind of statement, that we can even believe Rabbi Shimon, right? Now he has credibility. The scientists also maintain the same thing. We live in a world of illusion. In other words, what we see, or what I see, and you see, and we see two different things, we have both seen correctly. And we have both seen the opposite of each other. We have both seen correctly. Is that possible? The answer is yes. So obviously it must be a world of illusion. So I'm not here to convince anybody that we live in a world of illusion. We are already convinced. But for those who are, let's say, 20 years and older or 25 years and older, we have been educated with that one pretense that only that which is in the physical realm is what we consider to be reality, and anything beyond the five senses is called the world of irrational, illusionary, and now it's the opposite. The 99%, and you know when I say 99%, I'm referring to this body. You know this body? If it was condensed, it's made up 99% of atoms, and only 1% is me. That part that is called me. 1%. But yet 99% is atoms, the same atoms that are floating around in the air. So there are two parts. So again, the illusionary Malchut level is where this action took place. But at the same time, the Torah is teaching us that there are two parallel universes going on at the same time. It's like a railroad track. At times they seem to meet. But do they ever really meet? Never. It's an illusion that if you look down the track, what happens? They meet. But do they really meet? No. Maybe they do meet. The answer is maybe they do and maybe they don't, because the scientists is trying to drum into our heads today that whatever you see and what you saw, that is what you saw and that's real. So that means when I'm far away from something, the two tracks meet. When I'm close to it, they don't meet. What is that really saying for us? That the closer you get to the situation, the more you focus into a situation, you lose the situation. Wow, this is getting crazy. You know, the more I have a grasp of the thing, the less I have a grasp of the thing, right? All right, it's getting a little confusing. The Torah says it's not confusing. Because within every single individual, why is it sometimes yes and why is it sometimes no? Because there are two parallel universes, like in the chariots. Two parallel universes. The difference between the chariots and ourselves is because these two rails, you see, never met. They were two separate and distinct rails. One never interfered with each other. Schizophrenia, that's when one interferes with the other. You see, that's the problem. When the chariot looked down the tracks, he never saw them meet. He never saw them meet. And if we were so lined up and so connected with ourselves that we knew how to departmentalize the 99% and we knew where the world of illusion exists, those two tracks that we see miles away would never appear to be together. Because there are two separate and distinct parallel universes within all of us. Soul and body, if you want to call it that. Now, we raised the question before. Jacob was suffering because of the loss of Joseph. Joseph never thought it important to go back. Why didn't he go back? Remove the suffering of his father. With this understanding of two parallel universes, Joseph knew that he could interfere. You see, he could interfere. He can make both universes meet each other. But he was a chariot, and he knew that no, if he was a chariot, and if he was a tzaddik, then there were certain shows that had to play themselves out. If he returned to Israel, the exodus or the exile into Egypt would never have come about. Why? Because again, what is Joseph? Joseph is Yesod. And without going into the detail again, but when we pray each morning, we are always attempting to bring together the cosmos. What does that mean? Me. I'm the cosmos. I represent the cosmos. Every little atom, every molecule, universes upon universes, within all of us. This part of me, or the part of Joseph, is Yesod. What is Yesod? When we pray, we want to bring together, when we say bring together, not that they become one and the same. You know, it's like integration. Integration. What does integration mean? You slam together two things and hopefully water and oil can mix. But you know, as long as you can beat it together, but since they are two separate energy intelligences, they don't mix. They can never mix, because water is Hesed and Shemen, or oil, has a cosmic consciousness. And if I'm confusing to some of the people who may not have been listening to these lectures, water and oil is made up primarily of atoms. Atoms are primarily made up of consciousness, intelligence, thinking, like you and I. Oil is of a consciousness called Chachma. Another frame of reference, another level of consciousness. Water is Hesed. Another frame. Two frames they can work together, but they remain independent while they can be interdependent. One needs the other. That doesn't mean one loses the independence because it wants to become integrated with another force. In the bulb, the negative pole and the positive pole remain positive and negative, yet they are integrated as one unified whole if there's a circuit of energy. But it doesn't mean that there is no longer a positive pole, while the illusionary factor makes it appear like, oh, there's no more poles. You ever observe a bulb when it's lit? You see nothing but light, as if there is no more poles. As if, but in effect, the two poles remain. But they can be integrated, meaning they can be brought together as one unified whole. Yosef is Yesod, which means the channel for energy. Malchut, all of us, that's why Yosef is called what? The provider, right? He was the provider for the entire world. A story? No. It's only to explain away for us, what does Yesod mean? It means the channel for providing nourishment and providing everything that the universe is in need of. If he came back to Israel, Israel, as we know, fortunately or unfortunately, is the energy center of the world, where the greatest desire to receive exists. Now you know why Israelis have such a great desire to receive, because they're so connected to that source of energy called desire to receive. Malchut in its most intensified form. And I recommend those Israelis who can't handle it, leave. I guess they're listening to me because look at the emigration. They all feel the energy, consciously or unconsciously. But if Yosef had come back and made the connection with that land, it would be all over with. It would have been all over with. Because in our tefillot we say, L'shem yichud kudsha b'richu ushkintei, which means we want to connect the Vav with the K, for those of you who know something about the power of the Tetragrammaton, the Yud K Vav K. When Yesod is brought together, when that energy consciousness of sharing is brought together and becomes one unified whole, like in the bulb, with the negative, sharing means positive, negative means desire to receive. When these two would have been brought together, you have one unified whole. They would have been integrated one with the other. And Joseph, on that level of Yesod, realized that if he brought the whole show to an end, then what about all those souls? Meaning specifically, the souls of the Dor HaMidbar, Dor HaMabul, of the flood, or the generation of the Tower of Babel. Where would be their opportunity to come back, live in the world of illusion, and make their tikkun? It could never happen. Therefore, Joseph, on that level, knew that he could not return. He could not return to Israel, because then the culmination of one unified whole would come into existence, and there would be no reason. The film for Holocaust, the film for destruction, the film for making the golden calf could never come about. It was all over. He would be interfering with the process of tikkun of others. And as we know, the Zohar makes that very clear for us, that one must hesitate. In fact, one is almost forbidden to share advice with others, only provided that you consider that individual as close as you are to yourself. But we know how cheap advice is. It's passed so freely, right? The Zohar cautions everyone to desist from sharing advice. The opposite. Never give advice. Only provided, not even if you're asked. Not even if you're asked. But you must, when you share advice, when you are in the sharing process, that individual must be as you. He must be, he could become a one unified whole. That he wants to. And you feel to him as you would feel for yourself. That must be the condition. That's strong. Because in the sharing process, there must be an equal and opposite reaction, meaning an equal sincere desire to receive that which is being shared. The fact that I know what's good for you is not sufficient enough for me to now feel I'm an authority to share that advice. That is Yosef. Yosef knew that there was a process here, a process of new souls that would have to ultimately come down. Why, he would have loved to end the process. And so there would be no need for Holocaust, but what about those souls that needed a place for tikkun? And therefore he did not return. So he was conscious. And on that level, Yaakov was conscious. Yaakov was conscious. So what was the suffering? If you learn in the yeshiva in the morning, you know that we say, give me more in this illusionary world. How do you get rid of pain? Do you know how? Ask for more. Try it. Try it out. Don't believe the advertisements that say, take a Tylenol and instant relief, because all they are guaranteeing you is what? Temporary relief, right? Is there a guarantee for permanent relief? Never. I have never seen that advertisement. We want permanent relief. And how do you get permanent relief? The paradox. Ask for more pain. Try it. It sounds illogical. It sounds illogical, right? But then again, where's the rationale on the 5% level? Therefore, we need Tylenols and Advils and all the rest of the garbage, because we live in that illusionary world. Yaakov, as we perceive him suffering at the hands of Yosef's ignoring, his pain, but that never was true. Yosef was full aware of the illusionary pain, which was only part of the process. He was not suffering as we would understand. He was suffering in effect that he was separated from Yosef, meaning that there was no the concept of one unified whole was not going to take place because he was not going to return. He had to remain in exile, meaning he had to be away from the center of energy, so as not to create interference. Like Rabbi Shimon says, you have no right to interfere in someone else's tikkun. I have advice, or I want to share advice. No. You have to be careful, says Rabbi Shimon. You might be interfering with that person's own free will. If you're a good salesman and you'll convince him to be good, right? Maybe you removed the part of his tikkun process. Maybe he had to experience something or work or go through a head trip of his own to come to a certain conclusion, whereby if you have already convinced him of what he should do, then he himself didn't have the free will and determination to make a decision. So this aspect of interference is very crucial. Now you can understand how one can, if you hear so much about people telling us, if you're religious, this is what you should be doing and that's what you should be doing. No one has a right. No one. Not even Yosef had the right to interfere with the tikkun process. So who are we to consider ourselves the authority on how one person should or should not behave? Therefore, he did not return. Why did Joseph need this whole process? But, he didn't recognize. And then suddenly, he permits the brothers to, he unveils himself. He says, I'm Joseph, right? Now we'll come to, right? And then he makes himself known to his brothers. But one other point before that. The Asara Haruge Malchut, the 10 Tanaim, those 10 giants, sages, who were inhumanely slaughtered at the time of the destruction at the hands of the Romans, states the Zohar that these were 10 incarnations of these 10 sons of Jacob involved in the sale of Joseph. Doesn't that seem to contradict what we have just, been told by the Zohar?
That had to be done.
What's that?
You're saying on one hand it had to be done.
But if we understand the parallel universes, we have no problem dealing with. There was an aspect that we say we have pain. Jacob had no pain. But he had pain, even when we asked for more pain. But at that moment, do we experience pain? Of course. But on another level, for those who have already tried this new remedy of asking for pain, you realize that while you feel the pain, but at the same time you realize the paradox of pain, how it's slowly and surely disappearing. It's a great feeling. You should try it. Great feeling. If you have a bad toothache, try it. You can run to the medicine chest. That's one way to handle it. Or run to your dentist. It's another way of handling it. But I'm talking about the pain. Sometimes you have to deal with an infection. That's another matter. But we're talking about the pain aspect. Because pain and the infection has nothing to do with each other. They're two separate and distinct matters. But in any event, these 10 Tanaim, giants, now were suffering because they were incarnations of the 10 sons of Jacob, paying the price for what? For the sale. But while we are dealing with an illusionary Malchut level, nevertheless, it has its place in the Tikkun process. Physically, the body exists. If it was only illusion, then why do we need it? Because we do need that aspect of Malchut. We do need the both rails of the tracks. They must always be in existence because it is the only way that we can experience free will and determination. If there was no body, there would be no free will and determination. We would be of a robotic conscious level. There would never be, again, the removal of bread of shame, which is the primary purpose for why we are here in the first place. This 1% illusionary level that did participate in that sale, that physical reality level had to pay a price. So those 10 giants, you take Rabbi Akiva. What did they do with Rabbi Akiva? The Romans took him out, tied him up, and then took iron forks and slowly removed the skin. You know what that means? To remove the skin from the flesh. Skin from the flesh. You know how painful that can be. Sometimes you have at the corner of your nail just a little piece, and you tear it a little. Oh, how painful that is, right? You imagine now this was the pain that Rabbi Akiva was enduring, tells us the Talmud. And the Zohar tells us that upon seeing this condition of Rabbi Akiva, one of his students ran over to Rabbi Akiva and says, Rabbi Akiva, you, the giant, that the Gemara, the tractate in Shabbat says that when God wanted to reveal the Torah on Mount Sinai, the time of revelation, Moses protested and said, I should not be the chosen channel for the revelation. There is someone of a much higher level than me. And that was the soul of Rabbi Akiva. Now imagine, the soul of Rabbi Akiva, and this student, knowing that about Rabbi Akiva, confronted his teacher, said to Rabbi Akiva, you, of all people, how could this happen to you? And what was Rabbi Akiva's response? I've waited all my life for the snake, for that desire to receive for oneself alone, for the comfort to come to me, and I should reject it. In other words, right at this moment, my body prefers not to be tortured in this manner with the removal of the skin from the flesh. But I've waited all my life for this opportunity that I can put through the body through that suffering, because Rabbi Akiva, in effect, lived in two parallel universes. And also the Talmud tells us that when Rabbi Akiva would sit down to the sumptuous meal that his wife prepared, he would address his body and says, well, okay, I know how much you need that food, so go ahead, you eat, and I'll watch you. This is the way Rabbi Akiva addressed his body. Right? So, in effect, Rabbi Akiva was not suffering at that 99% level. He wasn't suffering. He said, in fact, the Gemara says he was waiting for this opportunity, that he could cleanse that mud pile of his, the 1%, the body, which, because participated in the sale of Joseph, participated in the joy. But, like my friend David said, doesn't the end justify the means? The answer is absolutely not. And where is the classic example? Without going again into all of the details, the classic example is Pinchas. The Torah tells us that when Pinchas slaughtered Cosby and Zimri, he did it for the sake of the Lord. To the extent that because of this merit, he received eternally the priesthood, the high priesthood, eternally. His children and children's children after him. However, states the Gemara, when Pinchas slaughtered these two individuals, he lost every right to the kahuna, to the priesthood. He lost it. So if that's the case, then how was he guaranteed? So Rabbi Shimon answers that he died and there was a clinical death. The body was there, intact. The soul left, and in an instant later, the soul returned. And this you have already learned in the courses of reincarnation. But what does it teach us? Without getting into the details of clinical death and how he was reincarnated, states the Zohar with the souls of Nadav ve'Avihu, who had died previously on Yom Kippur because they brought a strange fire while their father Aaron was alive. And he now became incarnated. But he died. He died for a split second, but there was death. Why was that necessary? Because the end never justifies the means to that 1%. 1% was the murder. That 1% had to pay the price. The 1% must pay the price. On the 99% level, on that pure conscious level, he was Kineyat Hashem. He was commended for it. But the 1% level had to pay its price. He was disqualified from the priesthood. So the Zohar tells us that he died, and why he died, but it was a split-second death and rebirth again.
But he was also qualified?
Who? No. He was reborn. He was reborn again. Reborn again, Pinchas.
He became a Kohen later on.
You don't like that expression, yeah.
But was he also
Why?
qualified?
He was reborn again. Right then and there. He was reborn. What?
Was he qualified to do that? Just like...
The Torah says yes. At that point, he was permitted to interfere in those two tikkunim, their tikkun process. It was justified. The Torah says it was justified. However, the act itself, despite the fact that it was justifiable, but the act itself was an act of murder. An act of murder is murder. And therefore he was disqualified from the priesthood. Therefore here too, despite the fact that these 10 sons were the chariots of the cosmos, on that level of 99%, but these were chariots, so they separated the two. One operated on one track, never meeting anywhere, and the one level following the rule of Malchut, one following the rule of the chariots, of the metaphysical realm. But that physical realm, the Malchut realm, did sell Yosef. It says it did sell Yosef because of the tikkun process, because there had to be an exodus, because there had to be a bondage. But nevertheless, it involved the sale of a brother. For that 1% illusionary process, a price has to be paid. So there's no contradiction between viewing the sons of Jacob as chariots, sure, at that level. That level, that's where they were. Same as Pinchas. At the level of whether he had done right or wrong, at a 99% level, it was totally correct, says the Torah. But that physical level that involved the physical murder is against the principles of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Because, in fact, that's where there are some Jews who believe that they can throw stones and possibly kill somebody because they are zealous. That zealousy comes from the concept of Pinchas. If he could do something like that, if he can go against the Torah, which said, Lo tirtzach, you're not permitted to kill. And he did kill. Why? Because the end justifies the means. Is that correct? Therefore he could kill, and he was commended for that. But the Zohar goes on to say, don't believe that totally. At only one level, if you're on the level of Pinchas, upstairs you won't receive your punishment. But the body and the illusionary level did go through the process of murder. That has to pay the price. And therefore there was instant death and a rebirth. Same thing here. These 10 sons, at the level, on that other level, on that other parallel universe, it was necessary for them to go through that aspect of suffering. And therefore Rabbi Akiva, who felt the pain, but what part felt the pain?
Physical.
It was the physical part that felt the pain. Same with Jacob. He was totally conscious of what was going on. We just said, if you're connected with God, we're trying to teach in our Machon how to connect with cosmic consciousness. What does it mean to connect with cosmic consciousness? Cosmic consciousness means that yesterday and today, as we said before, and tomorrow is here now. Of course it's here now. All I have to do is connect with it, because the now includes tomorrow. So we're learning how to connect with tomorrow. Does that mean then I can go ahead and connect and I'll know what stock is going up tomorrow and I can become a wealthy man? That would be a great reason for, and that I'd even give it away all the way to charity. What could be more noble than that, right? If you want to be connected with tomorrow, that means you've got to elevate yourself to that level. Then you can't drag it down and like the two rails seem to meet. You can't be in two places. That's how I answer the grandfather paradox, which I won't go into now. Now, Einstein came to the conclusion, because he was an Orthodox Jew at the end, and he came to the conclusion, that God doesn't roll dice with the universe, and therefore you cannot exceed the speed of, you cannot go faster than the speed of light. Why? Not because you can't. Not because you can, because if you could, then you can go back to the past and the future at the same time. And that's impossible. How does he know it was impossible? Never proved that it was impossible. But only it appeared. What's that?
A real scientist.
At the end, he wasn't. I say he was a strictly Orthodox Jew. This is the way it is. We say, no, you can go back. But once you can go back in time, you have achieved another parallel universe. So you don't have to worry about, for those of you who don't know the grandfather paradox, if you go back in time, if you can go back in time today, and you happen to think that your grandfather and grandmother are not suitable soulmates, and you are in a position to interfere with the marriage, right? And so you interfere with the marriage, because you can go back in time. So your grandfather and grandmother really never got married. If they never got married, then you are not here. Well, if you're not here, you can't interfere. You see, and this is all confusing to the scientists, including Einstein. So the simplest way to answer it, you see, is what? You can't go back in time. No more problems. No more problems. You see, this paradox doesn't exist no more. If you can't go back in time, there's no paradox. We say you can go back in time. That's what tshuva is all about, going back to the future. Going back to the future. Only by going back could you reach the future. Now.
It's true, because it's closer.
Therefore, when you go back in time, that's not your grandfather and grandmother, because the only way you can go back in time is when you've reached that elevated state of consciousness. Not the physical level, but now you're really connected to the 99%. When you're connected to the 99%, in essence, we're saying you're not connected to the physical reality realm. So who are you going to interfere with? The physical grandfather and grandmother? You have no connection with. That's not even your grandfather and grandmother. Because on the physical level, that's your grandfather and grandmother. But now on the 99%, you're something else. You're another level of consciousness. Therefore, when you go back, you can't even interfere. So the whole paradox doesn't even exist to begin with. Because when you do go back, if you can go back, then that means the only way you can go back is because you elevated yourself to another level of consciousness. At that level of consciousness, what is at this level, they don't meet anymore. Is that what we got through saying? The two tracks don't meet. They can work in harmony. They've got to work together. But they don't cancel out each other. They may appear to cancel out each other. They become one. You know, when you look down again, the tracks. All the way down, it looks like it got together. But, you know, they never get together. But they always run parallel. And without two tracks, the train can't run. If one's inoperative, it won't go. So you need both. But they do not cancel out each other and become one. They always remain two. So if you're on this level here, now you're divorced from this level. But you need both. You have the body, but that's not his grandfather and grandmother on another level of consciousness. Therefore, this whole story that seems to be inconceivable, it's not plausible, it's contradictory, it sets a bad example for everybody. It doesn't really. It doesn't. Now we can understand this aspect when it says Vayigash, which we began, the first pasuk of Vayigash Elav Yehuda. And Yehuda came near unto Joseph. And it says Vayomer. And the Zohar asks, actually, the three words Vayigash Elav Yehuda is miyutar. It's actually superfluous. Shahai maspik loma Vayomer Elav Yehuda biadoni. It could have said, Yehuda said to Yosef. Why does it say he came near to him? I mean, if he didn't come near to him, he couldn't talk to him, right?
Maybe he was whispering.
What's that?
Maybe he was whispering something.
Oh, there were no secrets. He was whispering. He wanted to whisper in his ear, right? In fact, maybe that's what it says. Maybe that's why he had to get close. But I think we've got through understanding that the Torah cannot be treated on a purely physical level of interpretation. And therefore the Zohar says, chariots probably don't even have to talk to each other, and they would understand each other, let alone that he had to come close to him, to whisper. Through ESP, I'm sure he could have communicated with him, right? So the Zohar says, why does it have... Oh, and came Rabbi Lazar to explain what we said about Erech HaPayim and so forth and so on, which would take about 3 more hours, but I'll just have to come to the conclusion of this point. Again, she'ein mafsikim ben gula letfilah, dahayru ben yesod lenukfa, ki liyardam anu tzrichim. We understand the reason why Yosef did not go back to Israel, because if the two consciousness of Israel, meaning Malchut, the energy center for where you have the desire to receive, Malchut, and Yosef HaTzadik, Yesod, came together as one unified whole, the two opposites, and became one unified whole, there would be no exile, there would be no exodus, there would be nothing. Then those Jews or those people who still had to come back to be incarnated because of some prior default and defect in their previous lifestyle would not have the opportunity to correct themselves. So we understand why Yosef did not return. Here, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, again the Zohar says, don't treat this as something physical, on the physical realm, that he had to come close to it. He didn't have to come close to it. But what then does Vayigash mean? That he wanted to, because the 12 signs of the zodiac are the signs of Malchut. Again, there'll be a book hopefully in the near future which explains what the constellations are about and what the planets are about. While astrologers deal with both, ask him why there are 7 major planets and why there are 12 major constellations, which we know exist. We see them. You see the constellations, for those of you not familiar, the Gedi, the sign of the goat. If you had a good telescope and you were out somewhere in the desert, you can literally see the goat, made up of stars. The form of a physical goat. That's how we know the sign. Now, all of these things, what are the planets? What are the constellations? Each one is on another level of consciousness. Suffice to say that. Therefore, the 12 signs of the zodiac, which no longer includes Yosef. It included Yosef on the physical realm before he became Yosef HaTzadik, which was Yesod. At one time, he was the same like the other 12 brothers. Therefore, we understand, too, why his 2 sons came in place of Yosef. Why Yosef no longer was considered part of the children of the 12 tribes. Is that right? If you know the Torah? Right? Yaakov said, Ephraim and Menashe now will be my 2 children.
That's for Nahala.
What's that?
That was
Nachla. But not Yosef. No more Yosef. Yosef disappeared. What happened? Why? Because Yosef became the chariot of a higher level of consciousness called Yesod, of the Magen David, the 6 Sfirot, right? Zeir Anpin, which is the real level of consciousness, whereas all of the other brothers remain chariots of the constellations. In other words, the constellations are in one level of a universe, and the 7 planets of another. Yehuda, it says the Zohar, came close to him. What does it mean, came close to him? He wanted, because Yehuda represents Malchut, wanted to come close to Yosef. He wanted to become one integrated, unified whole. That means he wanted to draw close. We're not discussing a physical drawing of closeness between each other, says the Zohar. And therefore, because we always require an atfilot, and that's the reason we have the Amidah. Because Amidah brings you into another level of consciousness. Those of you, who still feel the necessity of praying in the morning. I mean, I'm talking about praying. I'm not talking about, going through the trip and taking care of your business at the same time. That is possible, even during the Amidah. Is that right? It is possible. In fact, the greatest thoughts probably come to people while they're in the Amidah, right? Okay? But in any event, the Amidah is gone and forgotten. But if we understand the real purpose of the Amidah, it is to bring us, according to the Zohar, it brings you into a connection. That's why it's the most important prayer. Why is it the Amidah? Why do you call it standing? Why must it be recited standing? Because it's holy. That's one reason. Like the other prayers are not holy. You can sit. That obviously is not the reason. The Amidah is because, you've learned that probably in the classes, because we are going up into another dimension. And therefore, for those of you familiar with the Tefillah, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael, right? You're not supposed to say Amen. You hear the Chazan, he does not say it out loud. Why? There should not be the hefsek. There should not be a separation. Even with the word Amen in between God, Yisrael, and because the rest of the Tefillah is in one parallel universe called Malchut, and the Amidah, the going up into Yesod. What's the purpose? To bring together. But one doesn't cancel out the other. The 2 tracks remain and always will remain separate and distinct. It's like people. Some people feel that they give up their independence if they join with other people. But that should never be. There could be independence and interdependence. Meaning, if we can come to the realization that no one can get along without anybody else, but that does not mean that because I can't get along without anybody else, I should cancel out or nullify my own independence. It is not a contradiction. So here, what Yehuda was attempting to do is bringing together Vayigash elav ki Yehuda hisod hanukva, dainu tefillah, v'Yosef hisod geula. Yosef is the sod, is the secret of Geula. What do you mean it's the sod of Geula? At the very beginning of this evening, we were talking about being masters of our own destiny. How many really are? How many can say, I control everything? I mean, the weather isn't going to bother me. It's not going to spoil my season. And earthquakes will not interfere with my daily life. Crime will not interfere with my daily life. I mean, the environment, for most of us, is so overwhelming and pervading that we make very few decisions of our own that are independent of our environment. In other words, we're governed by television, by advertisements, what we wear, all of these things govern us on how we behave most of the time. In fact, I don't like to wear a tie. And I guess while I appear on camera, I should wear a tie. Well, I'm not going to wear a tie. Please, I rebel in that to that respect. But in any event, most of us do not control. We are not free people, that means, because if we are governed by our environment, if the style, the clothes we wear, is governed and dictated by whom? By me? What style I should wear, David? I mean, you and I know styles are important, right? No, who decided on the styles? Not me and you. But some fancy designer, maybe in Paris or even maybe in New York, he decided what we're all going to wear.
In Hong Kong.
See, even that, or maybe even Hong Kong decides today. Can you imagine how far the influence extends? All the way from Hong Kong. Tells me what I'm going to wear, what I'm not going to wear, what clothes are out of style, everything. What restaurants are in, what restaurants are out. And if you're into a nightclub, it's the one that's in or the one that's out. Who decided all that? What kind of haircut you take, right? Who decided that? Every aspect of our life is not governed really by ourselves. We are not, in essence, free. So what is the Amidah about? So where is that non-freedom? In the illusionary aspect. Everything that deals really with the physical world is the world that creates bondage. Yehuda wanted to interfere. Remember we said the reason Yosef didn't go back because, you see, he knew that he would be interfering with the whole exile and the whole exodus. But that didn't preclude, but Yehuda felt, I am in the realm of Malchut. This is great. Yosef's sitting up there in Zeir Anpin, and he's watching the show, right? And he says, I can't interfere, but I'm the one who's involved, right? I'm the one who's going to get it over the head, because I'm the one in that realm of Malchut, right? The physical reality. Let's see if I can change it. So he wanted to connect with Yesod, because Yesod represents Gula. That's the 99%. See these atoms? Look how free they are. Once they become part of the physical reality, where are they? That's their new home. Here they can float free as a bird. The moment they have been captured in the physical reality, they are what? Slaves. They are no longer free. The same way as for most of us, even if we are successful businessmen. We are not free. There is a customer that I need, or there is a legislation that I have to be. We are not free. People to be able to say they are genuinely free. Free. No one can tell me what to do. Look around. Search for that individual. Free. You know what that word freedom means? That you do what you... The hippies thought they had found it. Right? They thought they found it. To be free, to run away to some commune out somewhere. They were going to run away from the physical reality. That's not the Kabbalistic approach. Kabbalistic approach is stay where the Malchut is because you need that parallel universe. But that doesn't mean you can't connect with Yesod at the same time. Connect with Yesod at the same time. Move yourself and live there most of the times. Oh, you'll get it on the head occasionally because you're in that physical reality. So when we pray with the Amidah, what we are doing is we're hopefully connecting with Geula, that freedom that gives me a little respite, takes me away from the physical reality because the troubles are not in the realm of dreaming. Who dreams? So, well, sometimes people have nightmares. I'm not going to say no, but by and large, if you're not sleeping, and I thought we were going to have time to discuss the secrets of dreaming and sleep, which is in this parsha, the whole secret. Can you imagine if they would only give me from those $87 billion that have been spent on dreams, and waking up and sleep. 86. If they'd only give us a few $1,000, we'd unveil the whole secret for them. We'll advertise for nothing. Just the cost of printing it. But I guess we're not ready yet. But the whole secret of sleeping, dream, everything is right here in this parsha. Why? Why did Rabbi Shimon choose of all the parshiot, and those of you who want to read it, who can read Hebrew, unfortunately, in the English translation of the Sansinu, it can't be discussed because it's just too deep. It required, the explanation of the Talmud Sefirot. But hopefully one day, just as we've begun with the Parshat Pinchas now, which has never been translated into English, will be forthcoming soon. And this part also one day will be translated. I thought we were going to cover it, but we didn't get to it. But in any event, that's the aspect of being free.
How long would it take?
Oh, maybe about 7 hours.
Can we make it in 1 hour?
Capsulize it. Encapsulate the whole thing. No, I guess not. Good wine requires aging, right? There are certain things that require the process, right?
No, it's okay. As long as we make it next parasha or something. But we have to wait until next year. Which is it?
It may come sooner than that.
Okay.
If we can all open up, the reason that obviously I could encapsulate it, if I could throw out the code names, but every time I throw out a word like Amidah means you saw that. Well, I'm hitting some people like, oh, wait a second, what's going on? I mean, how do you connect the Amidah with Yesod? Yeah, because you're going now into that parallel universe called Ziyad Ampin. But everyone would have to be so familiar with it. Now, how long does it take to become familiar with it? Not too well. It's getting shorter and shorter. It's getting shorter and shorter. And if we can only convince everybody by the Zohar, I know you don't read one word of Hebrew. Scan it. Scan it. Be like that little scanner in the supermarket. He can read everything. He understands it. He even sends the message on to the hard disk in the office, right? Look how far it goes. Right? So maybe if I do this, maybe it won't go too far, but at least it'll stay here. Right? And that's going to enable everybody to begin reading and understanding things like that. Computers go very quick. Who created the computers, if not man? So that means man has the ability to bring things together, right? Cut out a lot of the time, space, and motion, which is in effect what man is striving to do. You want a real free capsule, free trip? Read this. It's a free trip. In any event, getting back to, so here he discusses the aspects of sleep and so on, because we know what sleep is. What does it have to do with here? Because it all has to do with Vayigash Elav Yehuda. That means we learn from these 3 words that Malchut can reach up into the dimension of Ziyad Ampin. All of us, even to that level of Amidah. Only you gotta at least know what you want to do. You imagine if you pray the Amidah and you've been doing that all along and you don't know why, right? Except, well, it says, I'm praying for good health, and I'm praying for a little more intelligence, and I'm praying for blessings, I'm praying for to wipe out my enemies. These are all the things, right? But I don't know, really. I'm asking for my competitor, boy, if I can get rid of him, it'd be great, right? I mean, that's what I'm really praying for in the Amidah, right? Or if I can read, the Baron's report on the market, grasp it even better. So Atachonen, give me more wisdom. If that's where you're in, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you'll get. That butts, I call the mud area. But that's not the reason. The reason is we want to reach the Amidah. We want to go up. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda went close to Yosef because he wanted to connect. Two parallel universes, two separate universes, but they can come together. They can come together. What do you mean they can operate and complement each other? They remain separate and distinct like in the bulb. They may appear like the two tracks coming together. But do the two tracks ever come together? Never. Never. Same way as in a bulb. The positive and negative never come together. This was Vayigash elav Yehuda. So the Zohar says that he was trying to elevate, and that's why the Amidah and the purpose of the Amidah, and this is what we have to think about when we pray the Amidah, is that we want, says the Zohar, Geula, freedom. Freedom. That's what the Amidah is all about. Freedom. Because when you have freedom, you don't have all of the dictates that force you into situations that you don't want to be. Right? You want to feel free. The word freedom already encompasses intelligence. The word freedom encompasses all of the needs that are necessary. It encompasses health. If you have freedom, you've touched, like we said before. Why do you have to go through the route of Tylenol? Isn't there some way I can connect without Tylenol? Not to a temporary relief. Isn't there a place that has permanent relief? No, there is no such thing. There must be something like that because not everybody has headaches. How come some people have headaches and others don't have headaches? You ever figure that one out? Who determines who has headaches and who doesn't have headaches?
People themselves.
What?
People themselves.
That's right. Well, who wants headaches? You mean someone decided that he wants a headache? Says the Zohar.
They say I have a headache. They have a headache.
And if he says I don't have a headache, he doesn't have the headache.
No, that's right.
Maybe. But I think it involves more than that. Again, if we take these two parallel universes, the headache is illusionary because the headache, certainly the soul doesn't feel the headache. Soul can feel internal pain, but it's not headaches that it feels. So what is the pain that we experience on that 1% level? What dictates when one has a headache or one does not have a headache is even the physician tells you. What does he tell you? Stress. The new word.
Yeah.
New word, right? You have a headache? What's the cause of it? Now they can really boil it down to and focus in on one word. Stress. Remove stress. My whole life is bound up with stress. What I gotta wear, even if I don't want to wear it. What I gotta eat, even if I don't want to eat it. What affair I have to go, even if I don't want to go. I mean, all day it's only stress. I want to do one thing, everybody else tells me you've got to do it another way. Right? So how do you avoid stress? You run away. One possibility. No. The Zohar says, Vayigash elav Yehuda. If you know how you can connect, if you know how you can reach another dimension, that is all that's required. Because within all of us, once all of these chariots have established the possibility for link up with another dimension, all of us can do it. All of us. And we can actually be free. So each day, although I haven't seen it too much, maybe in the Bet HaKnesset, with all these people praying, and I haven't seen the removal of stress, nor have I seen the freedom. But in any event, according to the Zohar, when you pray the Amidah, and you at least are conscious, and all you have to do is at least be conscious that you wish to achieve Geula through the Amidah, you have already hooked up and linked up with that dimension. Now, is that so difficult? I mean, let's say you can pray. Now, what happens if you can't pray? He's left out. He's left out, right? Or you can do what the Reform movement says. Now, I'm not here to condone either Reform nor other, but they say the next best thing to do is pray in English. The greatest fraud. The reason I say fraud, because tell me which person has experienced the removal of stress by praying in English. It'll never happen. So what happens if you can't pray in Hebrew? You don't know the words. Scan it. A new concept. Scanning it. If that fellow in the supermarket thought about it, I think it's good for us to accept it also. Scan it. Scan the Shemona Esrei in Hebrew. Because it is not as important to know what is being said than using the instrument of the Aleph Bet. Using the Aleph Bet to make that connection. And where do you get that connection? You get it with Geula. Freedom. Because once you have freedom, there's no stress, there's nothing. There's nothing. Even the pain becomes a source of refreshing. The pause that refreshes. You know, if you didn't have pain, you would never appreciate the period of non-pain. So it's a pause that refreshes. What do you think? It's only Coke? Pain. Okay. Okay.